Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Westernspring Television. Now the headlines. Bola Tinubu sworn in as Nigeria's President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez calls early general election for July 23rd. Russia launches 16th air attack on Ukrainian capital Kiev this month. My name is Tunde Ido. We begin in Nigeria, where former governor of Lagos State, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, has taken office as the 16th president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. At a colorful ceremony in Abuja, the nation's capital, the 71-year-old Tinubu took his oath of office alongside Vice President Kashim Shettima. Emmanuel Ujuadugele gives an insight into the event of the day.
A new sheriff is in town, and his name is Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu bears true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria,
President Tinubu will be serving Nigerians alongside his vice, Kashim Shettima.
As Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I will discharge my duties and perform my functions honestly to the best of my ability and faithfully in accordance with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the law.
These two men today took their oath as leaders of Nigeria for the next 4 years in the presence of national and international dignitaries at the Eagle Square, Abuja. Despite the inclement weather, the inauguration of Nigeria's 16th president went on as planned with the arrival of former President Muhammadu Buhari, who was chairman of the day. That and the arrival of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Oluwakayode Ariwoola, who administered the oath, signals the end of an era and the beginning of another one. Flags folding and handing over, military parades and other colorful activities defined the day after the light showers ceased. It's time for speeches, and the president takes the podium. He pays homage to his predecessor, the Armed Forces, Chief Justice of Nigeria, and other dignitaries present. His first few sentences address the lingering issue of fuel subsidy.
Subsidy. Unfortunate. The budget that I've glimpsed before I assumed office and what I've had is that no provision is there for fuel subsidy. The first subsidy is gone.
President Tinubu goes on to assure Nigerians that their lives and property will be safe under his watch.
Security shall be top priority of our administration, because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amid insecurity and violence. To effectively tackle this, we shall reform both our security doctrine and its architecture.
Inheriting a deeply fragmented nation with citizens divided along ethnic and religious lines, the 71-year-old Tinubu calls for fairness and equality.
Our mission is to improve our ways of life in a manner that nurtures our humanity, encourages compassion towards one another, and duly reward our collective effort to social aid and seek to divide us.
President Tinubu goes further to say all hands must be on deck so as not to undo the work of heroes past.
We must never allow the labor of those who came before us to wither in vain, but to blossom and another reality.
The president's speech comes to an end, but not without the statutory gun salute and hearty cheers.
President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria. Hep, hep,
Earlier, he had taken a short trip around the Eagle Square in his motorcade. After his inauguration, attention has now turned to the former Lagos governor, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, as he seeks to chart a new path for Nigeria in the next 4 years. Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, on the other hand, has now exited the scene alongside Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Both men now return to their normal lives as private citizens. Emmanuel Ujadugele, Westernspring Television News.
And outside Nigeria, heavy and sustained clashes could be heard in parts of Sudan's capital after hours before the expiration of a shaky ceasefire deal that had brought some respite from the 6-week-old conflict. According to residents, fighting continued from yesterday into this morning in the south and west of Omdurman, one of the 3 adjoining cities that make up Sudan's greater capital. Both sides have said they are considering extending a deal for a week-long ceasefire brokered by Saudi Arabia and the United States that was designed to allow for the distribution of aid and is due to expire at 9:45 p.m. local time today. Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, have been locked in a power struggle that erupted into conflict on April 15th, killing hundreds and driving nearly 1.4 million people from their homes. In the meantime, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has signed one of the world's harshest anti-LGBTQ laws, including the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, in defiance of Western condemnations and potential sanctions from aid donors. Same-sex relations were already illegal in Uganda, as they are in more than 30 African countries, but the new law further targets lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. It imposes capital punishment for some behavior, including having gay sex when HIV positive, and stipulates a 20-year sentence for promoting homosexuality. In a tweet by Ugandan presidency, Mr. Museveni was shown signing at his desk with a golden pen in a photo. The 78-year-old leader has called homosexuality a deviation from normal. However, some Ugandan right groups have condemned the move and have vowed a legal challenge to the law. News outside Africa, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has said Tehran welcomes better diplomatic relations with Egypt. Iranian state media reported this morning, noting that the leader made this known in a meeting with Oman Sultan Haytham bin Tariq. Relations between Egypt and Iran have often been fraught in recent decades, although the two countries have maintained diplomatic contact. Khamenei's comments came as Middle Eastern countries, including Egypt, are taking steps to ease regional tensions. In March, regional rivals Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shiite Muslim Iran ended years of hostility and agreed to restore diplomatic relations under a China-mediated deal. In the United Kingdom, the Metropolitan Police plan to stop attending emergency mental health incidents has sparked criticism, with critics saying the move was potentially dangerous. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, in a letter to the Health and Social Care Services in London, said from September, officers will only attend mental health 999 calls where there is an immediate threat to life. The Met argues the move will free up officers after a significant rise in the number of mental health incidents being dealt with by the force in the past 5 years. However, the Royal College of Psychiatrists president called the move unhelpful. Also, the chair of the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Mental Health Trust, Zoe Billingham, said the proposals will create a vacuum. She noted that there was no other agency to call other than the police for people in crisis, adding that there is no other agency to step in and fill the vacuum.
Is that unless there's a life and limb threat, the police aren't going to deploy to people in mental health crisis. But the trouble, Kimberly, is that until police officers get there and assess the situation, they're actually not really going to know precisely what the situation is with someone in mental health crisis. You know, you're going to have relatives that are extremely worried and concerned. And for 40 years, it has absolutely been the role of the police to attend in these extreme emergencies. So I have every sympathy with police officers who then find themselves spending, 10 and even longer hours with that particular individual, perhaps waiting in a hospital accident and emergency. And I think that there's much more that can be done to ensure that when a person is found by the police to be in crisis and needs to go to somewhere safe, that handover can happen much more rapidly. But for the police to withdraw as quickly as...
Elsewhere in Europe, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called an early general election for July 23rd after his party suffered a significant setback in local and regional polls. In a televised address to the nation this morning, Mr. Sanchez said he had informed King Felipe VI of his decision to dissolve parliament. It came a day after his Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, PSOE, and its junior ally, Podemos, lost ground during the polls, while rival Conservative People's Party, PP, and far-right party, Vox, outperformed. He said although yesterday's election had a local and regional scope, the meaning of the vote conveys a message that goes beyond that. He added that is why, as both Prime Minister and Poste's Secretary General, he personally assumes the results. In a rather sad development, 4 people have died after a boat carrying more than 20 passengers, including tourists, sank in strong winds on Lake Maggiore in northern Italy. According to Italian media, the boat overturned yesterday evening between the towns of Sesto Calendi and Arona. Italian news outlets reported that the boat had been carrying about 25 people who were celebrating a birthday when a storm developed over the lake, later turning into a small hurricane. It said 5 people were taken to hospital after being rescued. Everyone on board went into the water, but many of the passengers swam ashore or were rescued by other boats. Unconfirmed reports in Italian media say the boat passengers were British, Italian, and Israeli. In the West Balkans, NATO peacekeeping soldiers have formed security cordons around 4 town halls in Kosovo to keep back Serbs protesting against ethnic Albanian mayors taking office in the Serb majority area after elections they boycotted. According to a statement by the NATO-led KFOR mission, the force increased its presence in 4 municipalities of northern Kosovo this morning following the latest development in the area. It noted that in line with its mandate, the mission was ready to take all necessary actions to ensure a safe environment in a neutral and impartial manner. Tension broke out in April this year after Serbs refused to take part in local elections and ethnic Albanian candidates won the mayoral races in 4 Serb majority municipalities with a 3.5% turnout. Serbs have demanded that the Kosovo government remove ethnic Albanian mayors from town halls and allow local administration financed by Belgrade to return to their duties. You're watching Spring Global on Westernspring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Prince Royal was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Westernspring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back, and moving over to the Russia-Ukraine war, where explosions rang out across Kiev today as Russia launched a 16th air attack on the Ukrainian capital this month, hours after unleashing dozens of missiles and drones overnight. Panicked residents, some of whom initially ignored the air raid siren, rushed for cover when the sky filled with smoke trails and blast clouds. Authorities said all the Russian missiles were shot down, but one person in the central Podil district was taken to hospital with no major damage was reported. Ukraine Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Valery Zaluzhny, said air defense shot down 11 cruise and ballistic missiles fired in the second of attacks on Kiev. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry has confirmed its forces hit Ukrainian airbase in its overnight attack. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says if Moscow demands are not fulfilled in the UN-brokered Black Sea grain deal, the deal will no longer remain operational. Speaking at a news conference in Kenya, Mr. Lavrov said less than 3% of the grain exported under the deal had reached the world's poorest countries and that Russia's requirements were not being fulfilled at all. Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov had made an unannounced trip to the East African nation and was received by President William Ruto. Mr. Lavrov's visit comes days after Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba made an African tour last week. Meanwhile, Sweden's Foreign Minister Tobias Billström says he will discuss his country's NATO bid with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu at the military alliance's meeting in Oslo. Mr. Billström said he had contacted Mr. Cavusoglu to congratulate President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on his re-election over the weekend. He told British national broadcaster SVT that the Turkish minister had responded very quickly and confirmed that Ankara was open to discuss the NATO question. Sweden and Finland submitted NATO membership bids last year in an effort to fortify their armed forces after Russia invaded Ukraine. Turkey has only ratified Finland's NATO's membership, with President Erdogan saying Sweden was yet to meet all of his country's demands. Moving on, President Tayyip Erdogan and supporters today reveled in an election victory, lengthening his rule into a third decade, while rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu said it was the most unfair election in years. He did not dispute the outcome of the polls. Turkish lira hit fresh records low against the dollar this morning, though stocks rallied after the president secured victory. This report examines what lies ahead of the incumbent as he enters his third decade in office, with Ankara struggling with high cost of living and recent earthquakes in its southern province.
Tayyip Erdogan has won re-election according to the country's Supreme Election Council and unofficial data from the state-run Anadolu agency in a tense runoff after he failed to secure more than 50% of votes required for an outright victory in the first round on May 14. Official results showed Kılıçdaroğlu won 47.9% of the votes to Erdogan's 52.1%, pointing to a deeply divided nation. His challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu called it the most unfair election in years, but did not dispute the outcome. Complaining of the unfair elections, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu said the president's political party had mobilized all the means of the state against him. The election has been seen as one of the most consequential yet for Turkey, with the opposition believing it had a strong chance of unseating Erdogan and reversing his policies after his popularity was hit by a cost of living crisis. Instead, victory reinforced his image of invincibility after he had already withdrawn domestic, economic, security, and foreign policy in the NATO member country of 85 million people. The prospect of 5 more years of his rule was a major blow to opponents who accused him of undermining democracy as he amassed more power, a charge he denies. Given a victory speech in Ankara, Erdogan pledged to leave all disputes behind and unite behind national values and dreams, but then switched gears, lashing out at the opposition and accusing Kılıçdaroğlu of siding with terrorists without providing evidence.
Biz öyle bir kazanacağız ki kimse kaybetmeyecek demiştik. Öyleyse bugün kazanan sadece Türkiye'dir.
It said releasing former pro-Kurdish party leader Selahattin Demirtas, whom he branded a terrorist, would not be possible under his governance. Temitakpe Ajijalaluola, Westernspring Television News.
And in Asia, Japan put its ballistic missile defenses on alert this morning, vowing to shoot down any projectile that threatened its territory after North Korea notified it of a satellite launch between May 31st and June the 11th. The nuclear-armed North says it has completed its first military spy satellite, and leader Kim Jong-un has approved final preparations for the launch. It will be the North's latest step in a series of missile launches and weapons tests in recent months, including a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. According to a Japanese Defense Ministry spokesperson, Tokyo expects North Korea to fire the rockets carrying its satellite over the southwest island chain as it did in 2016. Japan's Defense Ministry, in a statement, said Tokyo will take destructive measures against ballistic and other missiles that are confirmed to land in its territory. It added that Japan will use its Standard Missile 3 or Patriot Missile Pack 3 to destroy a North Korean missile. In other news, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has said that the $3 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) will not immediately address the country's economic challenges. In a televised address to the nation yesterday, the Ghanaian president said the IMF bailout will restore confidence and put the country's economy back on a sound footing. He noted that the loan should also lead to the resumption of many of the infrastructural projects that have stalled. He acknowledged that seeking help from the IMF was a painful but necessary decision to help the economy recover from the impact of the global pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ghana is facing one of its worst crises in a generation, with high public debt and inflation, with critics blaming the country's economic problem down on gross mismanagement. In the United States, President Joe Biden has finalized an agreement with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to raise the debt ceiling over 2 years until January 1st, 2025, saying the deal is ready to move to Congress for a vote. The Democratic president and Republican speaker spoke yesterday evening as negotiators rushed to draft and post the bill's text to enable lawmakers to review compromises that are unlikely to be popular with progressive Democrats or hard-right Republicans. The two men hope they can secure sufficient votes before the June 5 deadline to avert a first-ever default by the federal government. A vote in the House is expected on Wednesday. Biden yesterday evening at the White House said it was good news as the agreement prevents the worst possible crisis in the nation's history. The deal follows weeks of heated negotiations between Biden and the Republicans to avoid a default that could cause financial market to freeze up.
Just spoke with Speaker McCarthy, and we've reached a bipartisan budget agreement that we're ready to move to the full Congress. And I think it's a really important step forward, And it takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery. And the agreement also represents a compromise, which means no one got everything they want. But that's the responsibility of governing. And this is a deal that's good news, I believe you'll see, for the American people. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default for the first time in our nation's history. An economic recession, retirement accounts devastated, millions of jobs lost. It also protects key priorities and accomplishments and values that congressional Democrats and I have fought long and hard for. Investing in America's agenda that's creating good jobs in communities throughout the country. It protects Social Security, Medicare, and veterans, and so much more.
And talking sports, Chelsea have hired Mauricio Pochettino as their new manager as the Argentine accepted the daunting task of reviving the troubled Premier League club. Pochettino agreed a 2-year contract with an option for an additional year and will return to the Premier League 4 years after being sacked by Chelsea's London rival Tottenham. The 51-year-old had been out of work since being dismissed by Paris Saint-Germain in July 2022. Chelsea co-owners Todd Boehly and Behard Eberle said in a statement, Mauricio was a world-class coach with an outstanding track record. Pochettino, who will begin his new role on July the 1st, replaces Frank Lampard after the former England midfielder returned to Chelsea as the club's fourth manager of a dismal campaign. Before we end Spring Global, here's a recap of our top stories. Former Governor of Lagos, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, has taken office as the 16th President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called an early general election for July 23 after his party suffered a significant setback in local and regional polls. Explosions rang out across Kiev today as Russia launched a 16th air attack on the Ukrainian capital this month. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Westernspring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Westernspring Television. I am Tunde Ido. Good evening.